He hears the scream first, as a ripple in still water. A prayer swallowed mid-word somewhere beyond his map. The astral sea shows him a star that should not exist, and the shadow of a cathedral, bent like a hook. He chooses to cross, because rot spreads and walls between worlds are treaties, not absolutes. He fits the sling ring with coordinates inked in seraphim numerics, yokes the eye to a demon's stolen star chart, and binds his mind to a compass he cannot fully trust. Heat tightens the room. Pressure rises. A white seam opens, and Stephen Strange steps through as the breach tears a new sky. The wound runs east to west, above a shrine world that names itself Heliodora. Pilgrims freeze on cliff stairs. Vox masts spit static. Macro chimes jam into a single held note. The seam drips sun-hot air on a morning meant for incense and rationed light. A manufactorum roof buckles. A reliquary spire sheds saints like rain. The city, Hive Orison Primus, stops counting and watches the split become a door. Something huge and iron-crowned pushes at the edge of the rift. Strange steps out into vacuum that is not vacuum. The cloak takes weight and wind. He hangs over a sea of stone and flesh and stacked devotion, eyes already sketching geometry. He draws a circle that is also a dome. One gesture, one arc. Sigils falling into place as if they have been waiting for this world to ask for them. The dome slams down like a bell cover. Shock waves meet its curve and run around it. A collapsed spire hits the ward, slides, and bleeds sparks instead of bodies. The city breathes again and then chokes as the thing in the rift completes its birth. A fortress ship slides through. Too close, too low. A warp-licked juggernaut with a cathedral's stubbornness and a predator's hunger. Its prow bears scripture burned backwards. Its wake peels rust from iron with a sound like teeth on tin. Its shadow falls on a pilgrimage square crowded with children carrying candles. Strange points, and the square moves sideways. The mirror dimension folds, snatching 100 meters of cobble and candles and human weight, tucking them into a pocket of still air where time detours around pain. The cloak flutters to keep him upright as gravity lurches. The fortress ship rakes the place where they were and does not notice the theft. On a bastion balcony, a woman in armor watches the impossible become policy. Canoness, Verena Saul of the Order of the Solar Oath, feels the shock in her bones and hears it echoed in 1,000 rosaries. Beside her, servo skulls bob like votive lights. She draws the sign of the Aquila over her chest, then snaps to her Vox officer. Open channels to the Governor Militant and to Ordo Agent Kaul, and the macro litanies. Now, in a data slate lit command chamber 4 kilometers away, Governor Militant Alaric Voss goes from skeptic to accountant. Asset registers as flying. Asset is warding. Asset is... He squints at Auspex staves that have no box for this. Performing non-mechanicus miracles. He points with a stylus. Macro battery theta, hold your fire. I want the thing in the sky. I do not want to shoot the one keeping my city from falling into itself. A figure steps out of a shadow no light made. Inquisitor Severine Kaul wears a coat that thinks. Her eyes take inventory faster than his cogitators. Shoot the fortress ship, she says softly. Not with faith, with metal. The juggernaut brings demons with it like barnacles. Flesh things with prayer wheels in their ribs, like saints inverted. They unfold in the air and ride heat into the hive. Strange tastes copper as the warp tries to name him correctly. He draws another curve. Whorls snap to place. The mirror dimension opens again. Not as a pocket this time, but as a wedge. The wedge takes incoming bodies and spins them away into a hall of glass and memory, where they will fall forever, without touching an orphanage. The eye pulses once. He hears a click of gears inside his skull. His blood hums out of sync for a heartbeat. He keeps drawing. There is no time for the price list. The fortress ship tilts. Its engines cough up scripture. Strange senses the structure behind it. a choir of engines, and a spine of spires, each inscribed with a language that is also a wound. He draws sigils over the ward like stitches. He makes the dome a lens. The lens bends stress, then pain, then sound, then the forward vector of a ship that did not plan for a lens. Macro batteries beam into the ship's flank. The city's guns wake as if insulted into coherence. Slabs of fire punch into the stained glass along its sides and make black flowers. Canoness. Verena's lip moves. Her sisters begin the canticle of the throne. It is not aimed at Strange. It is aimed at the wound in the sky and the thing trying to widen it. On a lower tier, dock workers kneel because the sky is finally doing something that looks like prayer. A child with a candle in each hand stands on tiptoe and whispers, "Thank you," to a shape that looks like a man in a cape and a wound that behaves like mercy. Inside the rift's light, something speaks with the voice of leaking fuel and old funeral bells. Strange hears the word gate and 9. He keeps one hand drawing, and with the other, he pinches the sling ring and skews the local horizon by a degree. The fortress ship finds itself falling toward a piece of city that has been retreated to one side. It scrapes a manufactorum stack and peels off like a scab, bleeding atmosphere and litany. Its demon passengers scream in two directions at once. The damped dome shakes. Wards buckle. Strange breathes slowly so the line in his hand does not waver, and the city remains beneath a sky he is lying about. The eye flickers again. Something old in it strains, because this place speaks another dialect of time and refuses to be bullied. "Who are you?" Governor Voss says into 3 channels at once. "Alive," says Inquisitor Kaul, cold voice even, "and useful. For now." "Which?" breathes a monk in the square. "Not as an accusation, but a taxonomy," the pilgrim child says. "Angel," and then blushes. Because angels do not wear red capes. The fortress ship begins to turn its guns toward the dome. Strange does not have hands left. He has a city to keep steady and a hole in the world to pin. He speaks a name instead. It is not the name of a god. It is a formula that tastes like granite and first snow. The ward's edge hardens. Shots meant to kill the dome warp into arcs that detour through mirrored sky. "Now," Kaul says, chin lifting toward the auspex. Macro Theta, Macro Kappa, and the Suffernot converge. 3 spears of light and uranium meet the ship's heart. It explodes inward with a sound too big for the morning. Strange closes his fist, and the dome becomes a bowl and catches light that would melt pilgrims. He lets it out like a breath. The sky goes from white to gray. The rift sags and tries to close, then remembers it is driven by intention, not physics. The first sirens find courage. They begin to speak again. They name streets that still exist. Strange lowers his hands. The cloak sags with him. He shakes out his fingers. The old brokenness in them sings. He does not look at the eye, because it is already looking at him. From the balcony, Canoness Verena salutes the air with her blade. It is also a prayer. "By whose leave?" asks a Vox officer. Tinny through the noise. "No one's," she says, and smiles. "By need." The Inquisitor is already moving. "Bring him in," she tells a squad of stormtroopers who have never trained for this. "And keep your helmets on. We have seen miracles. Detain the man who did them." He lands on a basilica roof, because roofs are where prayers go to cool. The stormtroopers fan out. He stays upright because the cloak shames him into posture. Identification. The sergeant's voice is firm. He is sweating inside ritual-painted plasteel. Strange looks at Kaul stepping out of her shadow like a judgment, and at Voss on a skimmer with dust on his boots, and at Verena above with a sword raised like a page marker, and he inclines his head. "Dr. Stephen Strange," he says, "Sorcerer Supreme, of a place that is not this place." He gestures toward the seam, now a hiss rather than a howl. "Your sky is sick. It reached me. I reached back." "Which?" says the sergeant reflexively, and then corrects himself because his training says not to die stupid. "Primary is the Inquisitor." Kaul's eyes move minutely. If you can do what you just did without paying the same price as every other psyker in the galaxy, she says, I will have you vivisected for the machine gods to learn how. Strange nods once. If that becomes necessary, he says, calm. The cloak ruffles like a scolded bird. But you prefer victory, pragmatism, Governor Voss says, smiling thinly. I prefer my hive upright. There is another wave coming, Strange says, looking at the rift which is trying to remember how to be in absence. They spoke of 9. They? Canoness Verena demands. She has climbed down faster than armor promises. What is their shape? Scripture that eats scripture, Strange says. A choir that sings you inside out. I can hold a lens. I cannot be your choir. Then we will sing, Verena says. She lifts her chin and her sisters align behind her like a theorem proving itself. And you will hold. He nods. I will hold. The second translation is not a ship. It is a litany laid over the city like frost. Windows fog from the inside because words condense. People drop to their knees with no theology, just a reflex to a pressure wave that feels like worship and starvation. Strange puts his hands in the air as if surrender were a stance. He pulls the ward taut and bends pressure so it spreads thin and fails to find purchase. The new wave's edge skates. Strange hears a different voice now. Measured. He hears mathematics trying to eat his alphabet. He tastes the idea of 9 and understands he will need more than geometry. From the command room, Voss barks orders with the relief of a man whose fear has been replaced by work. Stagger your salvos. Expect mirage phenomena. Prioritize spire-mounted artillery. Do not fire at the red. He gropes for a taxonomy. Cape. Kaul studies Strange as one studies a specimen in a flame. Your wards run on symbols that mean because you say so, she murmurs. This enemy changes what saying so means. Canoness, your choir, the Order of the Solar Oath, takes a breath together. They do not sing for him. They sing for the throne. The sound crosses the ward without permission or resistance. It meets the frost of words and makes steam, and steam becomes rain. It rains for the first time in months. The hive tastes water that has not traveled through pipes and cries because it forgot how. Demons try to climb through the rain. They slough. They unravel when prayer runs through them. Strange learns quickly. He draws his next circle using the rhythm of the hymn as a metronome. The ward strengthens with each refrain. The eye hums, as if irritated to be treated as an instrument, not a crown. The second wave cracks. Demon-bound scripture phrase where hymns are loudest. The rift falters. For a blink, the city thinks that might be the end. That is when the smart one arrives. It is not large. It is a man in armor the color of old blood, bearing a book bound in living skin and a blade that refuses to reflect. The thing calls himself Dark Apostle Malcharion. He walks on air as if air were a floor his god paid for. He looks at Strange and smiles with patience. Prophet, Malcharion says conversationally, voice amplified by choral vox. Your sigils are elegant. Your lens is almost sincere. Allow me to read to you how those things die. He opens the book. Words spill. The ward hears a superior grammar. Strange's circle curls at the edges as if embarrassed. The lens loses a decimal of integrity every second. The cloak slaps at demonic tongues and catches fire. Strange dives to meet him because there is no long-range defense against being unmanned line by line. Their first clash is quiet. Malcharion's blade slides along one of Strange's conjured lines and makes the line forget it was ever drawn. The red glow in the eye gutters. Strange's right hand aches with the old lesson of hubris and broken bones. He shunts the fight into the mirror dimension with a twist of ring and wrist. They step into a city made of reflections and the sound of lamp oil. Gravity behaves because he demands it. For a moment, Malcharion's words wheel uselessly against glass. Then the Dark Apostle turns a page and speaks a phrase that is also a hinge. Strange feels the mirror groan. Malcharion's liturgy is designed to predicate reality on obedience. It is a language that punishes double meanings. It bites at the mirror, where likeness is law. You defend with similitude, Malcharion croons. I attack with singularity. Strange feeds the mirror a lie about its shape and slides one pane across another, cutting the Apostle's footing out from under him. The blade misses Strange's throat by a syllable. He answers with 7 latticed sigils at different rotational symmetries, forcing the Apostle to read in 7 directions. For a beat, that confusion is a battlefield. The blade catches his shoulder anyway. It is a cut in the idea of shoulder. Pain comes without blood, and the cloak drags him back before the next strike makes man optional. He tastes rust. He hears the rift behind them, and the hymn like a lighthouse being paid in flesh. You will break, Malcharion says gently. Your ethics are a lever I can move with one finger. You mistake promise for lever, Strange says. But his voice is too calm to be a joke and too tired to be anything else. He tries to overwrite the blade's spiritual edge with a name that means dull. The book eats the name and smiles. Malcharion shows him a page that has his face. It is not a trivial trick. Strange sees himself praying in a chapel that burns and sees why, and would change it if he had 3 more inches of time. The temptation arrives hidden inside the defense. If he used the eye here as he has used it before, if he reversed, if he shaved the minute to fit, the eye thunders number, not as refusal, as impossibility. This place is a kiln, where his time work would become brick for someone else's temple. If he winds it, the rift will learn to spin. He refuses. This refusal has teeth. He collapses 3 blocks of the Mirror City into a cage around the Apostle, knowing the real Hive will lose those lines. Somewhere, stairs fall into a new alignment that makes a street into a wall. Civilians scream not because they are cut, but because their physics went sideways. He hates himself, and he does it anyway. The cage holds for a breath. Malcharion's book opens by itself, thrilled. The blade writes on the glass. Each stroke undoes a symbol. Strange buys seconds with architecture. He spends them like coin. Outside, Canoness Verena's hymn reaches a verse where the melody climbs stairs. Carvers forgot. The choir becomes a spear. It strikes the rift, not to seal it, but to frame it in a shape that the throne recognizes. The wound pauses. It is not healed. It is under review. Inquisitor Kaul fingerprints a vox bead. All artillery, fire at the origin of that voice, she orders. She does not know if it will matter. It matters. Macro rounds roar past Strange's shield meta and into Malcharion's sermon. The page with his face burns. The next one shows a diagram of a different failure. Strange does not read it. He lunges and marks Malcharion's blade with a sigil copied from the cathedral's oldest lintel. It is not his rune. It is this world's. The blade flickers and remembers being iron. Malcharion actually snarls. Blasphemer, he snaps, which is the first honest word they share. He forces the mirror dimension to slice them apart and staggers back into light. The wound in his shoulder has no blood. It spins with the wrong grammar. The eye is dim. The cloak trembles. He lands on the basilica, and Canoness Verena is there, sweat in the rim of her gorget, eyes bright. You bleed in words, she says, not quite reverent, not quite horrified. Their blade cuts decisions, Strange says softly. I mend with doctrine. He nods toward the lintel. Yours, if you will loan it. All things are loaned, Verena says. She presses a reliquary against his shoulder. The pain becomes comprehensible. It is still wicked. Kaul watches everything and writes policies in her head. War Council, she says. We speak while we can stand. Admiral, Canoness, Doctor. Now, they gather in a sanctum whose glass remembers saints. The city shakes in polite aftershocks. Vox cherubs roll past with strings of casualty sums. A tech priest of the Mechanicus stands in a corner, humming binaric envy at Strange's lines and wishing to autopsy him politely. Governor Voss leans on a hololith and does not fall over, because it would be impolite in front of Bayonet Company. The first wave failed because it was loud, Strange says, voice low. Slow enough for people who will be his allies if he does not frighten them. It assumed fear would lubricate physics. The second hurts, because it knows names. It makes the meaning of a line smaller. Canoness. Verena's jaw tightens. They will target Faith next. They already are, Kaul says. They read our creed and feed it back to us with us deleted. She looks to Strange. Your power. Costing? He does not lie. Every circle I draw here attracts attention. I am not of your warp, but the warp is a jealous landlord. It considers my rent in corruption. I can hold. I cannot hold forever. Not without paying to become similar to that which I refuse. Then we do not ask for forever, Voss says briskly. We ask for enough. Enough to cut their head and salt their neck. His finger taps an orbit on the hololith. Ship debris is falling across 3 districts. Fire crews are running on prayer. We need you to keep the sky honest while we move steel. Done, Strange says. He looks at Kaul. I will need blessed texts, relics, anything with rhythm older than their book. He lifts a hand as she starts to say no. Not to profane, to rhyme. Rhyming is allowed, Verena says with a quick, fierce smile. Blasphemy is for them. Kaul weighs doctrine against survival like a woman who wears both as skin. She nods once. Slow. You will not open doors without telling me, she says. You will not touch time. She glances at the eye. If that is a clock, break it. It is a lock, Strange says, because that is truer. A klaxon coughs. The hololith shows new red blooms. The rift ripples as if remembering a different mode of hunger. The choir keeps singing. Voices crack. Strange breathes in their rhythm and draws new circles with fingers that learned humility in a hospital bed and hands that remember bones as promises. The next enemy doesn't come as meat. It comes as a thought. A mimetic hex that tells people their skin is a book they can read if they open it. Medikey reports spike with knives. Strange cannot fight 10,000 private wars of self-harm. He fights the instruction. He writes a counter-order and drapes it over the Hive's common tongue. The cloak smothers 3 men gently as they shake with the need to interpret themselves. The order holds. The hex gnaws at edges. The eye is a stone in a river, not a dam. Smarter, Kaul says softly. Wider. Aim to erode, not to kill. He will try to make you write his scripture, Doctor. He tried already. Strange murmurs. He flexes his wounded shoulder. The reliquary press still warms. I refused. The price was a neighborhood that will hate me. They will live to do it, Verena says. You will apologize later. Or not. But they will live to decide. A servitor rolls past with a bowl of nails. A sister takes 3 and pockets them, as if she might need to build a house in a hurry. A junior priest slumps on a bench and sleeps, sitting up. Mouth open in a dream of water. Strange looks down at his hands and sees drawn circles where knuckles should be. He closes them. They become fists. Kaul's vox clicks. A voice he respects without liking crackles. Severine, it says, using no titles. Your witch. Bring him. Most holy authority requires his account and his defense. Now? Voss snaps, incredulous. While we bleed? Especially now, the voice says. Truth is not less required in battle. Kaul watches Strange. He does not flinch at witch, and she files that under useful. We will come, she says. She looks to Verena. Canoness. Hold. We will hold, Verena says. She grips Strange's forearm like a pact. Go to your throne, she tells him quietly. Be judged, and return with a command we can obey without losing ourselves. The black ship. Sable reliquary smells like old books and salt. Its Geller field hums with the paradox of sane madness. Strange boards with a small honor guard. Kaul, 2 stormtroopers. a medicae with tired hands, a confessor whose voice can kill men gently, and 3 sisters who wear their vows like light armor. Voss salutes from the dock with eyes that say, "Hurry." In transit, chapel light bathes faces in gold. A chapel serf, eyes inked with litanies, offers Strange a bowl of salt and iron. "For grounding," she says. He takes a pinch and tastes a world that refuses to forget itself. The medicae binds his shoulder with bandage threads woven with prayers not to unravel. "This won't heal the grammar," she warns. "It will remind the flesh." Kaul sits across from him in the little chapel that travels with them, because the universe is kinder when people remember why. "Your ethic," she says, conversational as a chess move. In one sentence, "Do no harm," Strange says. He looks at his palms. "Or the least harm necessary." "Heresy," the confessor says mildly, and smiles to show there is no malice. "Theology requires the recognition of error to find grace. In war, harm is currency. We spend it to afford tomorrow." "Then I am poor," Strange says. The ship shudders. Not physically. It shudders like a thought that the warp tries and fails to finish. A sister cleans her bolter while humming the canticle under her breath. "We sing because there are notes that demon tongues cannot hold," she says. "To no one, or to everyone. We carry them. Our throats are sheaths." Mid-transit, alarms wake. The Geller field flickers like a frightened candle. Kaul is on her feet before meaning catches up. "Contact?" she snaps. "Manifestation," says a navigator over Vox, voice soaked in drugs and eternity. A mirror. It arrives not as a ship, but as a corridor that refuses to join the ship correctly. The corridor opens, and a man walks in, wearing a cloak the color of wine gone wrong, and an eye with a crack down its pupil. He bows to Strange with courtly courtesy, sharpened to a blade. "I am the Archivist of the Ligature," the man says. "I was you when you were braver. I found efficiencies. I learned to cut choice from causality and replaced it with clarity. Come, let me show you how to save 1 billion lives by deciding for them once." The sisters level their weapons. Kaul lifts a hand. "Hold." Strange stands. He sees the offer and the trap braided. He sees a better siege. No contradictions, no choir, no argument with chaos, because argument presumes 2 mouths and his method allows 1. "No," he says, very quiet. "That is not saving. That is embalming." The Archivist smiles as one might at a patient in denial. "I will prove it." He lifts a hand and shows them 3 possible futures. In one, Heliodora burns clean and quiet, its heretics removed like stains. In another, Heliodora becomes a fortress with no children. In the third, Heliodora lives poor and loud and hungry and human, with demons at the fence and songs in the kitchens. Kaul cannot see the images. The sisters cannot see the images. The Archivist shows them just as Strange, because he is the only one he needs to convince. "You call the third virtue," the Archivist says, bored. "It is cowardice." Strange unbuttons the eye and lets it hang heavy. "If I go with you," he says, "do you stop, Malcharion?" The Archivist's smile reveals his hunger. "I become your Malcharion," he says, "but efficient." He gestures, impatient. "Come." The ship's lights dim. A hum rises from below like a warning bell in a dream. The navigator gasps and clamps their forehead. "The Astronomicon burns," they whisper, ecstatic and terrified. "Look! Look to the throne!" Through the ship's sanctified porthole, a ray of meaning knifes the warp. It is not light. It is instruction. The Archivist winces, not in pain, but in exposure. He is a solution. The ray is a question. He hates questions. Kaul draws her pistol with the same courtesy the Archivist offered. "We reach the throne," she says, "or we die trying." The Archivist bows to a superior protocol. He steps back into his corridor. It folds like the lie it is. They arrive at Terra, but not at Terra as tourists would. They arrive at a fortress planet that is mostly palace and mostly gun. They dock through 4 rings of permission. They step from the black ship into a hall where incense could be armor and gold could be oxygen. Custodians stand like definitions. Sisters of silence pass like knives that make silence a place. Strange's wards recoil from them and then settle with relief at the absence of noise. They walk the long walk. Skulls watch. Statues judge. Kaul's back is straight enough to be a bridge. Strange keeps pace with men who stride like centuries. The cloak manages humility and fails. It flutters once and then behaves because this is not a place to test air. They do not speak in the final hall because speaking is hunting. They kneel because kneeling is correct. The throne hums not like a machine, but like a monastery. Something enormous and asleep gives one slow breath. Strange does not look at the body on the throne because that is flesh and misses the point. He looks at the space around the body and understands that the Astronomicon is not light. It is will. The voice that is not a voice waits for him where his name would be if he had one here. It shows him 3 paths. It does not sell. It does not plead. It instructs by clarity. Return. He may go back to his world with a fading memory of a morning of strange angels and a hymn that tasted like iron. He will keep one lesson, that walls between worlds are treaties, not absolutes. The rift in Heliodora will either kill slowly or heal because of other hands. His conscience will carry a scar he will not remember the cause of. Free agent. He remains and does as he pleases. An unchained miracle. Cities will live because of him. Cities will die because he chose discretion over obedience. Factions will split on his name. His cape will be a flag someone learns to hate. Sanctioned servant. He binds himself to law he did not write. He accepts loss of autonomy. He earns maximal impact at maximal cost. He becomes a tool that chooses how to cut, not whether to cut. He will operate under constraints that will make the next battle slower and less beautiful and more honest. Strange considers the blood price logic. He thinks of the square that still exists because he stole it into a pocket. He thinks of the neighborhood he twisted into a cage to buy 3 heartbeats. He thinks about time, which is a trap here, and language, which can be healed here if one sings in a register that refuses to forget the poor. The throne's will does not press him. It offers. In offering is a command. Be worthy. I accept sanction, he says at last, voice steady. On conditions that make me less useful and more safe for those who must live with the aftermath. Conditions bloom on the air as if he spoke them, and the throne was already writing them before he knew them. No manipulation of local time beyond perception and personal anchoring. No portals opened within unshielded population centers without inquisitorial assent or Canoness equivalent ecclesiarchal blessing. No intrusion into minds except to lift a compulsive lie installed by the enemy, and only if no other avenue exists. All rituals to be performed inside Aegis pattern blessed geometry, drawn from the era before blasphemy learned to rhyme with creed. Kaul bows her head, because these are her thoughts translated into mandates. The custodian nearest shifts, a micro-approval. The Sisters of Silence do not nod or blink. They are the nod the Emperor does not need to give. A burning passes over Strange. It is not pain. It is standardization. The cloak's edges embroider themselves with a double-headed eagle that sits over his old glyph like a treaty signed on top of a painting. The sling ring bears a sigil that is not the Aquila, and not his either, but the marriage of them, a 2-headed serpent biting a compass. The eye accepts a chain that looks like a rosette and is one. You will hold mercy as weapon, the silent voice says, not as instruction, but as fact now. You will be hated well. You will be loved poorly. You will save enough. He bows. It is not worship. It is agreement. When they leave, the light in the corridor is the same and entirely different. Kaul walks at his side and does not smirk. "Welcome to the Imperium," she says. "Doctor?" "Witch," he says back, experimentally. She allows herself a very small, very sharp smile. On Heliodora, the choir is hoarse, and the rift still breathes. Canoness Verena's gauntlets are dented. Her people have slept standing, and their sleep has been doctrinal. Voss has redeployed steel until steel asked for mercy. The Dark Apostle has not left. He has learned patience. He is kneeling on a piece of air, whispering to it how to become knife. Sable Reliquary punches back into real space, trailing prayer smoke. Strange steps down a ramp, flanked by stormtroopers that now look like context, not threat. He walks to the edge of the basilica and lifts his hands. He does not draw the same circles. He draws smaller ones, inside larger ones. A lace of Aegis that integrally includes the cathedral's lintel, and the text carved into a fountain, and a child's chalk drawing that says "Mama" with an arrow pointing home. Malcharion raises his head. He reads the new pattern and does not see a way in that is elegant. He opens his book to uglier options. The mimetic hex comes like mold. Strange answers with a hygienic ritual. Hand washing, salt, clean water from battered medici tanks, the humble geometry of kitchens. A ward can be a recipe. A nun in a side street wipes a child's face and unknowingly participates in a rite that denies a demon its doorway. The War Council reconvenes on a roof under a sky that is a treaty with itself. Plan, Voss says. We kill the Apostle, or we will die an inch at a time. Kaul lays out doctrine as tactics. Verena translates the Canticle's verses into artillery schedules and relief rotations. Strange listens and inserts geometry where logistics leave gaps. The tech priest mutters and then nods, rattled and persuaded. They move. The duel comes again because it must. Malcharion brings new words. He speaks in the key of extinction. Strange brings old words loaned from a lintel, and a recipe, and a child's chalk. The blade slides close, and he does not try to dull it with names now. He binds it into a pattern of appointments. You will swing here, then stop. The blade obeys schedule for one impossible second. In that second, a bolter round finds Malcharion's book. Canoness Verena's shot is not luck. It is math, solved by a hymn. The book screams. Pages die like moths. Malcharion roars and pulls at the rift with both hands, demanding 9 open where 3 are left. The rift refuses because Strange has kneaded the city's meaning into it, and the city does not consent. Consent has become a weapon. Your throne will forget you, Malcharion spits, last barb thrown at a woman who sings. We do not sing to be remembered, Verena says. We sing to make remembering possible. She shoots him through the throat. He falls as if someone cut a sentence in half. The rift sags. The lens holds. The choir stalls, then rises ragged, then strong again. The city does not cheer. It exhales. Strange lowers his hands and allows himself a very small smile that tastes like salt and bread and painkillers. The aftermath is not peace. It is inventory. Voss tallies losses and finds a future in the sum. Kaul writes a report that is also a threat against any who would use this witch without paying his cost. Verena takes off her gauntlets and washes her hands like a sacrament and invites Strange to do the same. He does. The water is cold and holy by intent rather than nature, which is the point. He stands in the square where the child with candles stood. The child returns without candles and with a scrape on his knee and stares at the new embroidery on the cloak. Are you ours now? The child asks, in the way children speak to men who can break and mend mornings. I am my own, Strange says, and yours by oath. He touches the sling ring, and the rosette winks once. I cannot fix everything. I can hold long enough for you to fix most things yourself. Kaul hears and nods, because that is what she would have written if the throne had asked her to write his motto. Word spreads because of mouths, not Vox. The Mechanicus whispers about the Aegis-lace and writes subroutines called hygiene. The black ships adjust protocols to make room for a man who is not a psyker, and is the most dangerous psyker they have seen. On Cadia that was. Veterans drink to a name they do not know. On Ophelia 7th, high priests file this as miracle with caveat. The Eldar watch and mutter about humans learning new tricks too late. In the Eye of Terror, a god of change laughs and writes a note to himself and eats it. In a library that is not a library, the Archivist of the Ligature closes his book and looks at his hands. He is efficient. He is starving. He swears he will show Strange the mercy of a solved equation. On a splinter ship limping out of Heliodora's orbit, a surviving warpsmith builds a device with pylons shaped like unsaid words. He names it the Hexameron of unmaking. He means to unwrite the Aegis-lace and sell the deed to whoever pays in suffering. Strange stands on a promontory and looks at the sky. He raises his hands and does not draw. He breathes. The cloak tightens like a hug he doesn't admit he wants. The city below him moves in a pattern of markets and funerals and flirtations and repairs. He listens to it and learns its rhythm the way a surgeon learns a pulse. The last image is not the man. It is the emblem his oath has made. Across segmentum solar, along pilgrim routes and in the margins of catechisms, scribes begin to draw a small sign to mark wards that work. A double-headed eagle, stitched in a circle that implies a compass rose, with a third hidden point that is not a direction, but a decision. It glows faintly when someone is about to choose fear and chooses duty instead. The galaxy is very large. The ember is very small. Stephen Strange holds his hand around it without smothering it and prepares to bleed in useful shapes. The sky does not tear again that day. It learns to be a treaty with itself, and Heliodora, loud and poor and human, adds a new verse to a very old hymn. Night breaks over Heliodora not by darkness, but by exhaustion. Floodlights lace the hive in grids that pretend to be daylight. Choirs rotate, voices raw. Fire crews run lines like rosaries across buckled districts and call them miracles with hoses. Strange works in small motions. He moves candles back to their altars without touching them. He chalks circles in gutters that insist on being straight. He threads the Aegis-lace through door frames and market awnings so it catches the wind and teaches it manners. Governor Voss turns logistics into a prayer. He requisitions rivets like penance and hands out rations like absolution. Keep your people fed before they get philosophical, he tells a deputy, deadpan. Philosophy's heavier than bricks. Kaul walks the cracks in the city and decides which are tactical and which are blasphemous. She catalogs rumors as if they were knives. A man says the red-caped witch makes water boil by looking at it. She writes that down as useful in winter. Another says the witch put a book in the sky. She marks that dangerous and circles it twice. Canoness. Verena stations sisters at kitchens, not just ramparts. War enters where hunger lives, she says, and they nod because they have known this since novicehood. They teach hand-washing as though it were a rifle drill. They make wooden ladles into scepters. The cloak learns Heliodora's breeze. It sits still in the big halls and flares in alleys where children run. Strange's shoulder throbs when rain hits it. The grammar wound hates being explained. He welcomes the pain because it keeps his promises loud. At dawn, a courier skiff limps in from the outer docks with a message in plain text. No sigil, no cipher, just ugly truth. A small pilgrim moon named Cardia has gone quiet. Vox dies inside its air like laughter in a tomb. The last words. Script fell from the ceiling. It asked our doors to forget us. Kaul has a map open before the skiff cools. That is not a raid, she says. That is a test site. She looks at Strange. Your lens has made enemies curious. Voss swallows 3 curses and 1 prayer. We have the Sable Reliquary for long-range escort, he says, already requisitioning in his head. If we do not go, Cardea becomes the shape of our future. Verena is already armored. We go, she says simply. We carry our voices. She touches Strange's sleeve once, light, because she is not sure yet if this is allowed. And you carry the geometry. The black ship departs with a slimmer choir and a belly full of stubborn. Sisters of Silence join the escort, blank women who make psychers into husks by standing near them and thinking nothing too loudly. Strange bows to them before the jump. They do not bow back. They nod once, like doors that admit honesty, and nothing else. Sable Reliquary hums into the warp with a shiver that feels like baptism by sand. In the chapel, the confessor reads in a voice that smells like old wood. Kaul checks her pistol, then checks the faces of her squad, and marks fear in them as proof of sanity. Verena sharpens silence with prayer. Strange sits cross-legged with the sling ring in his palm and breathes on purpose. Mid-jump, the navigator hisses. Something leans. They whisper. Not at us. At where we will be. The Gellerfield's chant wavers. Crewmen look at one another with the tight smiles of men who have decided not to discuss mortality near the stove. Cardea hangs in space like a candle gone to wax. It is small and devout, and built with hands that had dirt under their nails. As Sable Reliquary approaches, the Auspex coughs out nonsense. The atmosphere reads as text. The moon's magnetic poles scan as punctuation. On the surface, doors open to a street that does not remember why it is between houses. People stand where they were and read the air with their mouths. Kaul swears once, kind and low. We sweep, she orders. No psychers without a silent beside them. No one speaks doctrine except me. Words are weapons here. They disembark into quiet that has been cleaned with chemicals. Strange feels his circles itch. He lifts his hands to draw and drops them because a null maiden has stepped beside him. Her presence makes the warp crawl away and makes his sigils shy. He smiles at her and nods. Walk with me, he says. She is tall and shaven and wears no badge. Her gaze is a steady pressure. They move. The street bends as if to bow to the null and fails, confused. Strange takes chalk from his sleeve and does not draw a circle. He draws a square. The square is humility in geometry. The air hesitates, then stops trying to be a sentence. Name? Kaul asks the null without looking. Liss, the woman says, voice quiet and present like fresh bread. It is the first word Strange has heard here that does not cut. A door opens. A child peeks. He has the wrong number of fingers because the room forgot how to count. Verena kneels, her armor creaking, and shows him her hands and her pockets and her empty mouth. We have music, she says, not as a trick, but as a fact. You may stand in it. The child nods and pulls a grandmother after him, with a grip that is more theology than flesh. The old woman's eyes are clouded, but not blind. The ceiling spoke, she tells them, careful with each syllable. It told us we were annotations. It asked us to erase ourselves to help the paragraph. Kaul's jaw tightens. Where, she asks softly, is the paragraph? The grandmother points to a shrine at the center of the settlement. Its roof is a book open to weather. Its altar is a door removed from its hinges and laid flat like a man in the ground. Words move across the roof the way light would if it had teeth. Strange approaches with Liss a half step away. He tastes the roof's sentence and recognizes a family resemblance to Malcharion's grammar. But there is machine oil in this one, and a bitter pride. The warpsmith's hand is here, lines hammered into liturgy. He takes out bread from a ration pouch, because magic is suspicious here, and bread is not. He breaks it. He lays each piece on a corner of the square he drew. He begins a ritual he learned in Kathmandu and rebuilt in kitchens. Touch bread, touch brow. Touch neighbor's hand, breathe, repeat. It is a loop small enough to fit in a pocket. The roof pauses because it recognizes recursion and misreads it as submission. It is not. It is ceremony. Confessor, Kaul says. Sing me the smallest song you know. He sings a lullaby 1 line long. Verena hums the drone underneath. Lys does not sing. Lys stands and unhooks the local gravity of fear. Strange draws a second square inside the first, and a third inside that. And the space between them becomes a moat for thoughts that bite. The roof tries to quote the lullaby back with a rhyme that kills. It fails because the tune is wrong for murder. The letters run like ants in rain. A machine whine rises under the shrine, cruel, regular, devout. Kaul gestures. 2 stormtroopers peel off like commas and disappear behind the shrine. A vox click. Found it, one whispers. Device in a crawlspace, 6 pylons. Spikes carved like prayers left unsaid. Strange feels the hexameron of unmaking before he sees it. It is a sentence diagram made steel. It eats symmetry and spits doubt. Kaul raises a hand. We do not shoot, she says. We brave. They crawl. The crawlspace is a throat lined with nails. Lys leads. The device flickers at her, offended, because she is a hole in meaning. Strange follows on his elbows and shoulders. The grammar wound in his flesh complains about the wires overhead, as if bullied into Latin. The hexameron hums a cadence. It is an unsong. Strange lays his palm on cold iron and says hello. The machine does not care. He takes a wrench and loosens a bolt with the courtesy of a surgeon and the profanity of a dock worker invented for the purpose. The cadence wobbles. He unscrews the next, and the device remembers being parts. The unsong stutters. Above, the roof exhales letters it cannot hold alone. Verena's sisters catch them on their tongues like snow and spit them into the dirt. Kaul lights one letter with a match, and it burns blue and wrong and pretty. Auction grade, she mutters. Someone tried this on Cardia to prove shelf life. Lys stands like applied silence until the last bolt falls. Strange lifts the central spine out, and it is heavier than truth. He lays it on the floor, and the shrine stops conjugating itself. The hexameron dies with a gusty sigh like a congregation finally allowed to sit. The child claps once, startled at his own noise. The grandmother laughs without teeth. The settlement begins to sound like chickens and wind and shoes. Who sells these? Voss asks over Vox from orbit. The question a growl. Heretics with invoices, Kaul replies. We follow the shipping crate. The crate's steel bones carry marks scratched by hands that do not trust stamps. A sigil repeats. A hooked rune that means ligature, in a language that learned to lie to make friends. Kaul does not smile. Grail Point Station, she says. The market where nothing is illegal and everything is condemned. They do not ask permission from Grail Point. They moor at Docking Arm 9 because 9 is a joke, and they are in the mood to refuse jokes with bullets. Business smells like old blood and new ink. Cogitators chatter in 100 alphabets. Men and things that used to be men hawk relics, sins, and spare futures from stalls built out of old pilgrim dreams. Kaul walks like she owns the place. In a way she does. Fear is an Inquisitor's mortgage. Verena moves at her side and buyers move rather than be moved. Strange keeps his hands folded, not to prevent magic, but to prevent offense. At a stall made of doors, a warpsmith with one too many jaw hinges offers a demonstration. He has a box with 6 legs, like knives. The hexameron divorces you from your false geometries, he says, proud. It teaches rooms to be honest. It removes superstition. It makes prayers inert. Kaul points a finger. Confiscated, she says. The warpsmith laughs until Lys steps forward. Silence falls with weight. The warpsmith's augmetics chirp, then go ashamedly quiet. How much? He asks in a smaller voice. Cost is your life, Kaul says mildly. Payment plan. Immediate. Strange touches her wrist. It is not defiance. It is punctuation. Better currency, he says. He points at a woman hovering at the edge of the crowd, hands ink black, eyes hungry. Who wrote your schematics? He asks the warpsmith without looking at him. He dies a little in the face. A patron, he mutters. He wears your face broken. The Archivist of the Ligature steps from a doorway that did not exist and applauds once. Grail Point's lighting chooses him while pretending not to. Efficiency visits, he says lightly. The market rewards clarity. Verena's hand tightens on her hilt. Kaul does not draw. Surrender your patronage, she says, or we end your accounts. The Archivist bows to their courage and ignores their request. He lays a hand on the Hexameron's box. This is messy iteration, he says, bored. I would have built it clean. 6 is amateurish. 7 stabilizes. 9 harmonizes. You sell a world without questions, Strange says. He feels Liz steady him from the side with the absence that is her gift. He wants to ask the Eye to cheat. He does not. Your way saves lives and kills them well. The Archivist smiles with patience. My way saves the idea of them, he corrects. This place eats people. I arrange their digestion. They die into a shape that benefits those who live. Kaul steps between them, like arbitration made flesh. You come here without army, she notes. Do you think we will let you leave? Of course, he says, fond. You are efficient too. Shooting me in the market would scatter the lie. You prefer a clean war to a dirty riot. Verena hears the truth in this and hates it. We prefer mercy, she says. Mercy is not permission. 2 of Kaul's troopers flank the warpsmith. Liz stands where arguments go to die. Strange breathes and draws a line on the air with his finger, and makes it a fence no one sees until they try to cross. The Archivist sees it and approves. Progress, he says. You are learning to defend without overtime. The bargain is not a bargain. Kaul takes the Hexameron and leaves the warpsmith with nothing but future charges. We will come, she says quietly. After we ruin your customer base. The Archivist tips 2 fingers in salute. After, he agrees. He vanishes into a door that refuses to list where it goes. On return, they find Heliodora rearranged into hope. Voss has established bread schedules that double as militia drills. Verena has trained a choir of children because children sing when adults forget their words. Kaul has a blacklist of buyers that looks like a field of poppies if you squint. Each flower is a raid. Strange builds a room. It is small and windowed and sits at the edge of a square where 3 lanes meet. He calls it the Concord. Inside, he chalks floor geometry anyone can learn. He nails a recipe to the wall. He places a bowl, a broom, a bell. When you fear, he tells them, standing with his hands behind his back like a schoolmaster. Ring, sweep, share. It will not make monsters kind. It will make you congruent. A boy rings the bell to show the others, and blushes because he is suddenly important. A woman sweeps the threshold of her grief and cries without shame. A baker shares a loaf and calls it liturgy. The Concord holds. It spreads. Markets laugh easier. The warpsmith, cornered by debt and hunted by doctrine, chooses relevancy over loyalty. He arrives in a crate of dried herbs and begs Kaul's agents for confession without confession's cost. He is building the 9, he babbles. He means to write your lace away, doctor. He means to sell the unmaking of you to the highest bidder, to prove a principle. Where? Kaul asks. Titan Spindle, he breathes. An old orbital thread above a gas giant named Axioma. No law. Too much dignity to call itself a market. He will demonstrate by… He stops, eyes wild. By making a planet's prayer forget the planet. Verena grips the table until Wood protests. We go, she says. Voss does not argue. He grants the fleet he never has. He burns stores to fuel this one choice. If this fails, he tells Kaul, I lose my governorship and my city. If it succeeds, I keep both, and sleep like a man with a debt his grandchildren will honor. Sable Reliquary translates with company. A picket of Navy frigates follow, their hulls scratched with saints and dents. The void smells like cold iron and the inside of a coin. Titan Spindle gleams in a geometry that angers artists. Axioma turns below, banded in cream and rust. On the spindle, The Archivist and his clients gather in a hall that thinks it is a courtroom. Mechanicus renegades, noble malcontents, a sororitas apostate who wears her vow inverted, a rogue traitor in robes of law. They all watch because they all intend to rent reality later. The demonstration requires a choir. The Archivist does not bring one. He hires one. Men in gray sing a nothing that erases nouns. The 9 pylons stand like teeth. Strange steps onto the spindle, with 12 sisters of silence, spaced like punctuation marks in a sentence no one will misread. Kaul flanks him with stormtroopers who keep their helmets on and their curiosity holstered. Verena walks forward with a banner that is less fabric than instruction. "Cease," Kaul says, voice amplified without humor. By writ of conclave and by practical reason, the Archivist lifts a hand. The choir ceases. He smiles at Strange as a professor might at a student who arrived early. "We will show the market 2 futures," he says, generous. "Then it can choose. Your empire loves choices. You confuse voting with choosing," Kaul says. "The market votes with money. Choice is what a person does when no one arrives to tell them what to buy." Verena plants the banner in the spindle's floor. The floor tries to be polite and fails. "We will not debate, we will witness," she says. "Speak your proof, heretic. Then face ours." The Archivist gestures to the pylons. 9 unmake your lace, he says. 9 make prayer decorative. 9 make cities obedient without bullets. He looks at Strange, a man explaining a lever. 9 are mercy. Strange sees the logic and the lie. He nods because he respects good engineering even when it kills. And the price? Noise dies, the Archivist says. Noise kills people. Order saves them. Strange steps into the circle before Kaul can forbid it. Liss steps with him. The Archivist frowns for the first time. "You bring silence to a machine," he says, almost impressed. "Clever." Strange opens his hands. He does not draw. He invites. The Concord's rites begin, piece by small piece. A sister rings a bell shaped like a thimble. A trooper sweeps a square that is not dirty. A Navy captain shares a ration biscuit with a stranger from the Mechanicus, who breaks it with trembling hands because breaking has mostly meant loss to him. The 9 begin to hum. The spindle learns harmony without consent. The gas giant sighs and tries to forget its name. Strange lifts his face and prays, not to a god, but to the stubbornness of people who refuse to be arranged. The words are simple. This is ours. The Hexameron of 9 speaks. It tells the room why door frames are lies, and why songs are taxes, and why grief should be outsourced to machines. Liss's presence makes its voice thin. Verena's banner catches its syllables like birds, and lets them go alive. The Mechanicus apostate watches and weeps because he was sold a future of elegant absolutes and is being offered a mess that loves him. Kaul sees his tears and does not add them to her report because mercy belongs unfiled. The Archivist tries to cut choice out of causality with a gesture that broke other worlds. Strange steps into that cut and fills it with a practice he learned from a man who swept a temple. He gives causality a broom. It laughs at him and does not end. The duel is thought and muscle. The Archivist moves like a man who hates friction. Strange adjusts like a man who honors it. He refuses time. He refuses perfection. He chooses enough. Kaul's teams move in the periphery. They plant sanctified charges on pylons with hands that would rather hold infants. Verena leads a verse in a key that machines cannot sustain. Lice stands center and makes the warp look away like a shamed animal. "Why not be efficient?" the Archivist asks while they fight in inches and syllables. "Why not spare them the weight?" "Because weight builds muscle," Strange says, panting now. "And muscle lifts neighbors." "You are arrogant," the Archivist says, and he means it kindly. "I am responsible," Strange says, and he means it as a sentence, not a virtue. The charges blow in a sequence that tastes like a hymn. The 9 shudder, topple, try to reconcile, fail. The spindle screams like a tuning fork struck by a forgiveness it did not plan for. The gas giant remembers its name and keeps it. The archivist stands in the noise and closes his eyes. "You always choose the path that keeps you," he murmurs. "I choose the path that keeps them. You don't," Strange says softly. "You keep the idea of them." For a breath, the archivist looks human and tired. "That is all I have," he says. "I envy you your small miracles." He steps backward into a skewed stare and is gone, leaving the ligature like a whisper in a hallway. The market collapses into shouting. Kaul arrests with a scholar's precision. Verena escorts with a queen's patience. Strange sags, and Lys's hand on his forearm keeps him from being prayer for the floor. The cloak flutters its worry. The eye is heavy as a promise kept. Later, in the quiet pocket of Sable Reliquary's chapel, Kaul sits on the floor across from Strange, with her coat folded neatly beneath her, like a rug. "You could have tried time," she says, as if offering him a compliment he chose not to deserve. "I wanted to," he admits. "But my oath fits like armor now." He rubs his shoulder as if needing grammar. "It's lighter when it costs me." The confessor nods in the doorway, unseen approval a soft sound. Verena lays her gauntlets down and her hands are small without them. "You see my sisters as soldiers," she tells Strange gently. "They're also midwives. We push hope into the world and slap it until it cries." He smiles at that even as the laugh hurts. "I will remember." They return to Heliodora under a sky that has forgotten how to tear, and keeps practicing remembering. The concord multiplies. In foundries and habs and on ramparts, people ring, sweep, share when fear claws. It does not feel like magic. It feels like work that refuses to leave its tools at home. Kaul convenes a conclave on the basilica roof because roofs are honest. She brings an Ordo Xenos savant, whose eyes see colors people lie in. She brings a Mechanicus Magos, with a spider's hands, who hates Strange and respects him more. She brings a Navy captain, who writes with a carpenter's pencil and says little. "We need policy," she says. "We have miracle. We require manual." Strange writes the rules he agreed to on the throne wall, line by line. Time only for anchoring. No civilian portals without dual sanction. Mines are doors we do not enter without proof the enemy already lives inside. Geometry only in Aegis patterns, approved by ecclesiarchy. "Break these," he says softly, "and I become the problem you thought I was when I fell out of your sky." Kaul signs beneath, in a hand that has closed so many warrants it can do it asleep. Verena signs with the flourish that is not pride. It is joy. The Magos traces a binaric echo reluctantly, like a blessing turned to code. The Navy captain draws a square because he is not fluent in ink and wants to be included. The archivist does not wait. He moves among worlds like a rumor, offering clean war and clean peace. Administratum officials invite him to briefings where numbers swell and people shrink. Rogue traders toast him in rooms built out of contracts. A governor on a mining moon signs a decree that deletes festivals. "Efficiency," he writes, and the word chokes his planet like smoke. Heliodora gets visitors. Pilgrims now come not just to the shrine, but to the concord. They ask to learn how to hold when sky tears. Strange teaches them to ring and sweep and share and draw squares. He says little about magic and much about weatherproofing the soul. In a cafe knitted out of scrap, a girl asks him if he is a saint. He shakes his head. "Saints die correctly," he says. "I live untidily." The girl likes this. She eats cake with her fingers and hums a tune from a choir she is not old enough for yet. Malcharion's acolyte tries one last trick. He writes a litany of last compromise into cookbooks and hymnals, and slip sheets tucked into prayer books. It changes recipes, so soup becomes a vow, and bread becomes a burden. Women read it and feel their kitchen become a barracks. Strange takes the sheet, reads the litany, and laughs once. Bitter. "He learned from me," he says, and then fixes what he taught. He writes a counter litany. It is not complicated. Feed the hungry. Do not let your food become a leash. Teach the children to stir. Do not let your stirring be a whip. Sing over soup. Do not make your song a tax. Verena stamps it with the ecclesiarchy's seal, because good secrets need uniforms too. Kaul receives a summons thick as a brick. High Conclave demands testimony on sanctioned sorcery in Sector Solar. It is not rebuke, it is prophylaxis. She prepares like a woman sharpening a house. Terra again, not the throne room. A hall of arguments where voices were trained to cut and heal. Kaul speaks first, not because she outranks Strange, but because she knows exactly when to take his bullets for him and when to hand them back. She recounts Heliodora, Cardea, Grail Point, Titan Spindle, the Nine, the Concord. She admits mistakes. She refuses apologies for necessary harm. Strange speaks little. When he does, his sentences have corners. I serve by obeying limits, he says. I disobey by being alive. If you need me dead to make policy neat, I will kneel. If you need me messy to keep children unburied, I will stand. An old man in a robe with stains of ink and soup watches him with wet eyes and nods, as if he has waited for someone to say that, while not trying to impress him. The conclave argues around him like weather around a mountain. It concludes with a new title no one asked him if he wanted, Legate Thaumaturge to Segmentum Solar, warranted by Rosette and Rule. Kaul hands him the seal in a quiet antechamber, smelling of paper and sleep. You can resign after I die, she says. Preferably not before. He takes it and feels weight shift. The cloak wrinkles as if disapproving of bureaucracy, and then accepts the addition because fashion loves medals. Verena sends him a ribbon blessed by girls who gargled salt because choir practice made their throats raw. He ties it to the sling ring. It looks ridiculous and perfect. The warpsmith makes one last machine with his guilt. He calls it the hymn thief and intends it to eat songs and leave armies. He knows he will die for it. He hopes it will make his name a footnote in the Archivist's book. It does not. Kaul's strike team finds him in a warehouse and arrests him with both compassion and velocity. Liss stands in the doorway and makes his last prayer forget how to begin. The Archivist watches from a balcony in a city that will burn for other reasons. He sighs, tired. He writes a note to himself and eats it. He builds a door no one can find until they are ready to choose wrong for right reasons. Heliodora's calendar changes. They add a day named for the Concord. On that day, no one goes to work by compulsion. People ring and sweep and share. They fix fences and recipes and gossip. Children paint squares on walls and call them windows. The city exhales on purpose. Strange writes letters to places he will not go. Do not wait for me, he says. If the sky tears, gather. Draw corners. Feed a stranger. Sing in key or not at all. The warp is a bully. Bullies hate kitchens that laugh. Some letters are intercepted and burned. Those worlds will learn other ways. Many arrive. Those worlds begin to hum with stubborn. On a void ship called the Gentle Ledger, a rogue trader reads the letter, laughs, and posts it in the galley. Months later, a tier opens over a mining world and the crew holds with soup and bells until Navy arrives. They tell that story widely. It sounds like nonsense, which is why it spreads. Kaul ages like leather, pleasantly. She smiles more and sleeps less. She keeps a list of enemies on a strip of parchment and a list of allies on her palm, written each morning because allies change. She tolerates the Mechanicus Magos, who founds a minor order called Ordo Geometra, devoted to safe patterns. She hates the name and blesses the work. Verena sees 4 novices take vows and 2 sisters die, and one sister lay her bolter down to marry a baker who bakes bread that tastes like hymns. She officiates with tears and jokes and doctrine. She drinks cheap wine with Strange on roofs and argues aesthetics and policy. They disagree like old friends who know disagreement is a kind of liturgy. Liss continues to stand where arguments end. She walks with Strange when he needs his edges softened. He asks once if her silence is a burden. She shakes her head. "It is a place," she says. "I live there. I invite others when they cannot find their doors." The Archivist returns on a day with too much light. He finds Strange alone in the Concord, chalk-stained and tired, and at peace. He sits opposite, legs crossed, cloak behaving because the room demands it. "You are winning," he says without rancor. "No," Strange says, smiling. "I am losing slower." That is enough. The Archivist looks at his hands with the mild grief of a man who made the wrong vow and cannot undo it because he meant it at the time. "There will come a day when your oath binds you and 1,000,000 die because you refuse to cut the knot," he says. "What then, Legate?" "I will cut my oath," Strange says, immediate. Then, after a beat, softer. "And then I will take its weight back. Publicly, I will let myself be bound heavier for the next fight." The Archivist laughs with genuine delight. "You finally sound like a priest," he says, and vanishes because doors like to end scenes on a line like that. In the Eye of Terror, a god of change rolls dice and eats the results. He dispatches 1,000 small plans and one long one. The long plan stalks slower than rumor. It will reach Heliodora in years. The small plans arrive daily and find the Concord ready with chalk and a broom and a bell. On a world nobody names aloud, an Eldar Farseer watches the pattern of human stubbornness and wonders if it can be braided with craft-world prophecy. She sends a messenger with a gift, sealed with old grief, a pre-heresy Aegis diagram that sings to the cloak and makes the sling ring warm. Kaul opens diplomacy with eyebrows and a drawn pistol, then relaxes. "We make allies with scissors," she mutters. "Cut, then tie." Strange stands on a buttress and watches Heliodora breathe. He sees repair schedules pinned like rosaries. He hears children running and failing to be quiet. He tastes ash and bread. He feels the weight of the seal on his chest and knows it is lighter than the hands that made it heavy. He thinks of home. He thinks of a city that vibrates with traffic and coffee and neurotic hope. He thinks of a cape he wore when jokes were armor, and of friends who died because he learned slow. He prays for them, using words that are not prayers here, and feels the throne not answer, which is answer enough. Keep moving. Keep mending. Keep bleeding properly. Night comes like a blessing. The floodlights come on late because someone tripped a breaker fixing something else, and everyone laughs and lights candles and calls it a festival. Verena sings a verse she learned as a girl and forgets halfway through and hums the rest. Kaul allows herself a second glass and tells a story about an orc freebooter who tried to buy her hat. Strange sits in the Concord and writes another letter. "If you meet a man who offers efficiency for your soul," he writes, "ask him if he cooks. If he says no, do not let him set your table." He seals it with a sigil that is not magic and not law. It is courtesy. He hands it to a runner who will take it farther than a spell. Morning breaks by bread. The market opens with knives and laughter. A woman rings the bell because she is afraid, and then laughs because she is alive. The square fills. The symbol stitched on Strange's cape hangs over it like weather. Eagle compass. Compass eagle. A joke played on destiny by people who refuse to be neat. In the far distance, a new rift tries to learn to split. It fails immediately, baffled by corners and kitchens. It will learn, because enemies do. When it does, the city will already be sweeping. The galaxy notices. On Necromunda, gangers spray a small square around their shrines, and fights stop 5 minutes earlier. On Armageddon, a commissar allows a bell in a mess tent, and desertions drop by a fraction that saves a battalion. In orbit of Baal, a chapter serf tattoos a little box on his wrist to remind him to breathe between alarms. On a backwater in Ultima Segmentum, a mission station with a roof made of doors paints the emblem over the lintel and sleeps without dreams for 1 night in a year. The Archivist presses his palm to a window on a world that will try to be obedient and fails because children exist. We are both wrong, he says to the glass. But your wrong tastes better. He smiles and begins his next cruelty with compassion, because that is his brand, and he is loyal to it. Kaul sends Strange away sometimes. You're a banner, she says. Banners draw bullets, travel, teach. Leave me the boring heroism. He obeys because obedience is the point of power. He visits forge worlds and agri-moons and pilgrim barges and shows them squares and gives them bells and learns their recipes. Verena writes him letters with jokes about doctrine and splinters. He writes back with jokes about geometry and soup. They know they are writing love letters to work and are content with that fidelity. Liss remains. People move around her like water around a keel. She stands in alleys where mimetic hexes gather, and they cannot get foothold. She sits with mothers who have lost sons and says nothing that is a comfort, and is comfort anyway. She is the Concord's center, even when away. A year and change after the spindle, the long plan arrives. It is subtle. It does not tear. It settles like dust that talks. It tells people their squares are prisons, and their bells are leashes, and their sharing is surveillance. It almost works. It would, if the Concord were a program and not a practice. Strange does not counter with force. He calls a city meeting like a bad mayor and makes everyone late for profit. The square fills. He stands on a crate and says 5 sentences. We built the Concord so we could stand together, he says. If any square has become a cage, paint over it. If any bell has become a whip, melt it. If any sharing has become a chain, break it. You may fail. You may stop. Begin again. The dust finds itself unauthorized and sullen. It drifts away to find a place where rituals are laws, and laws forget why they were made. It will feast elsewhere. Heliodora eats bread and breathes and goes to work. The last image is not an omen. It is a star chart. Across a handful of sectors, navigators begin to prefer routes that look like a pattern a child might draw on a table with chalk while waiting for soup. Lines prefer corners. Corners prefer people. The Astronomicon does not change. It simply shines more kindly on paths that respect kitchenware. Stephen Strange, legate thaumaturge, sits in a room that refuses to be holy, and therefore is. He sharpens chalk. He oils the bell's hinge. He sweeps. He listens to the city hum. He lifts his head when alarms begin and smiles without joy, because there is so much to do, and all of it is worth it. Then he stands, and the cloak settles around him like a vow, and he goes to work.